Hi, I'm Mike Scrutton with Adobe, and we're today going to talk about the Adobe PDF print experience and a little bit about what you need to know about PDF and AI, how these two interact, what that means for end-to-end print experiences. And we're going to talk a little bit about a use case using embellishment workflows. When I got started back in the early 1990s, this is pretty much how I worked in my office. I had an Apple Macintosh. I used Adobe Illustrator to create content for a specific job that I wanted to print, a brochure, a flyer, or what have you. When I'd got my design ready, I'd print to Adobe PostScript and I'd send Adobe PostScript to my faithful Linotronic 300. It had a rip in front of it and it would output film, which we would process, turn into metal plates and hang on a printing press. And we could print copies of this flyer or brochure. It was a bit of a one-to-one relationship. I knew exactly what I was going to be making, exactly the process that we were going to be using to output to the Linotronic. I needed to create separations for CMYK. And we'd set up Illustrator accordingly to actually generate something that could be printed. And it was connected via a cable, probably no more than 6 feet long. I was sitting right next to this film setter. Now, as time moved forward, we get into a slightly different world towards the end of the 1990s. The idea of digital printing began to emerge. All printers were beige in the 1990s, if you remember. Maybe we did have one of these newer digital printers available like this Icon, or maybe if we were still printing using offset, could go directly to a plate setter. We didn't need to image film and process that and shoot them onto metal plates anymore. We could image directly onto metal plates that could be hung on our printing press. And one of the technologies that enabled this is Adobe PDF. The same design tools from Adobe like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign was emerging at that time were very much still available. But one of the advantages of PDF is that it was device independent. I could take my output and I could print that on any type of device, be that a digital press or actually using a plate maker. And that page independence of PDF, which we'll talk about in a minute, was very, very important because whereas previously we would use film and cut it up and lay out and do imposition manually using this transparent film, now we could create something which was press ready. The PDF file could be manipulated by the prepress system and create something which was required to whatever the output format that was required for the individual device. Now, as things move forward into the 2000s, then of course we became to be liberated. The smartphone began to emerge. But what was important here is that we managed to decouple ourselves from the idea of designing for only one particular output device. Designers were liberated that actually they could be freed up using PDF to actually create their content and print it on any number of different devices and any number of different sizes. We didn't just have to design for a brochure anymore. We could take the same design, use it on a business card or on hang it on an advertising hoarding. We could even output for web, and we could walk down the street and our viewers could look at the output on their phones. The idea that we could design once and use for any number of different applications began to emerge. And that was quite liberating. It really meant that we could actually create this content at our desks. We could even be mobile when we were designing. We could design on laptops. We could design on our phones even, any number of different places, and output in any number of different places for any number of use cases. Maybe it was paper stationery goods or packaging, but we could even take these designs and print them on things like t-shirts and mugs as well. So we began to decouple this whole idea of the world of design and the world of manufacture. Now, our friends at Zazzle actually illustrate this quite well on their website as well, where an artist can take their content and upload it and use it for any number of different applications. Could be stationery goods. You could take your design and output it on a business card or on an invitation. But you actually might be using any number of different substrates. You could be printing a shower curtain. You could be printing leggings, a necktie, even a skateboard deck. So as things get more and more complicated, then the world of end-to-end print workflows have to step in and actually do a lot of the clever work here. The designer can design once, but it's the pre-press workflow that makes sure that the content is ready for whatever the output system requires. Now, you might well be using an offset press, but you could just as easily be doing digital output. You could actually be printing on wide format. You don't have to be printing on a small sheet anymore. You can print very, very large. But the pre-press workflow has become important as part of this process to actually make sure, do any preparation that is required for any of these particular output devices. But the important thing is it's not the role of the designer to have to set in stone the output that is actually going to be required from the final print. We have this idea of a proof, be it a hard proof on paper or some other substrate, or a digital soft proof that we see on our screens to verify that what we're going to get is exactly what we wanted. But we've simplified the work for the designer. This changes very, very subtly if we think about the difference between a pre-press workflow that you might have at a press shop and in a web-to-print environment. And in this case, the big difference is that the length of the print run has become a lot shorter. We're not just printing tens of thousands of copies of something anymore. We might be printing thousands, hundreds, even tens or dozens of a particular print job. When we're doing that, we actually shorten the cycle. The customer actually becomes effectively the person approving at the time that they upload their artwork, or they create their artwork maybe on a website that's been provided by the print service provider, the web to print provider in this case. And many of these pre-press steps become fully automated. They need to be automated. If they're not automated, then actually it's going to slow down the process. And as the amount of time any one job spends on the press device gets shorter, we need to make sure we're spending a commensurately less time in the pre-press area to process these jobs. Now, here at Adobe, we've been giving a lot of thought to this, of course, over the years. Adobe is well known as being the ultimate solution for creative tools. The Adobe Creative Cloud, including products like Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, is well established. There are newer tools that have come along, such as Adobe Express, which allow people, even if they don't have access to lots of training and skills, to easily create content that can be used to design. But whatever the creation that these designers are creating, we have this reliable output framework using the Adobe PDF print engine and its cousin that's used in the Office, the Adobe Embedded Print Engine. But what these print engines allow us to do is to take these designs that have been authored by a designer or a creator and actually reproduce them faithfully on the output device so we don't have any of these surprises. What we've introduced this year, and we started talking about this earlier in June in Europe at the FESPA trade show, was the new Adobe Print Services. And the Adobe Print Service sit in between these two worlds of creation and RIP as a services platform to correct, enhance, and optimize job files ready for production. What's key here is that PDF is the technology that is used all the way from creation through to RIP. And by taking these PDF files, correcting them if there are any issues in them, enhancing them for the production workflows, and actually optimizing them to make sure that they run smoothly and efficiently through our press shops, we're able to make sure that we get the best possible end-to-end experience with the least friction possible. Now, one of the exciting things is that the Adobe Print Services, and in fact the entire Adobe PDF Print Experience, is built with Adobe core technology. It's exactly the same code working with design files in these creative applications as in these RIPs, as in these pre-RIP solutions that are part of the Adobe Print Services. And not only is it based on this same Adobe core, we have the added excitement that they're powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning, further enhancing our ability to process these files. Now we're going to talk about this end-to-end workflow and get in a little bit under the hood and see exactly how this stuff works. But we're going to talk about some fundamentals that we need to understand to be able to see how this applies in reality. We're going to talk a little bit about PDF, so we can actually see what's actually inside these files and what makes PDF the ultimate solution for end-to-end workflows. We're going to talk about a little bit about AI and how AI can be used in these solutions. And then we're going to talk a little bit as well about how we use these technologies within the Adobe Print Services. And stay tuned for a little conversation about embellishment and what more we can do with AI and PDF in embellishment workflows. So let's get started with a little bit of a deep dive into PDF. PDF has become a ubiquitous tool for exchanging files between designers and press shops. And what's important about a PDF file is that a PDF file allows us to preserve information at its highest possible level of abstraction, in its original form. PDFs are device independent, particularly when we create PDF X4 files that you might have heard about. We're basically putting everything in a PDF file so it can be viewed on any screen, can be printed on any device. And this has become really, really important. We're used to the idea that all sorts of documents are exchanged using PDF. Adobe Reader has been instrumental in making sure that anybody can view a PDF, whether they're sitting at home, whether they're sitting on a train, whether they're sitting in an office or in a press shop. That ubiquity of the Adobe Acrobat and PDF Reader really makes it possible to power all these solutions. But there's some important things that we need to understand about PDF in order to see why it's been so useful in these print workflows. Now, at their heart, PDFs contain a set of layered objects. Unlike something like a JPEG or a TIFF or a PNG that you might be used to, where everything is already rasterized at a particular resolution for an application, in a PDF file, the objects remain independent of each other. So, for example, text is stored as the letters that make up the words that you would see in a PDF, and fonts are separately stored within a PDF file. This text refers to the fonts, which means we can reproduce the text at any particular size very, very easily within a single PDF. We can mix different sizes of text and use that same font definition. It makes that PDF file very, very compact. Secondly, we store vector information separately from our text in our PDF file. This vector information is there for that artwork that includes the very sharp edges and lines and curves that you would have within the design, how the colors are separate from each other and how they're built up and layered to create the design that you have in mind. Separately, photographic information is stored yet again separately within the file at the highest possible resolution, maybe that's come off the camera or a scanner. Because we're storing it separately to the vector and the text, it means that we can compress it very, very efficiently and make sure these files don't get too large. We're not actually having to put information in there that we don't need. But the more information we have available to us, then that means that these files can be reproduced later on any particular device. Color information is stored separately from the text and the vector and the photographic information as well. And what's important is that we store color information that's most appropriate for the information, the objects that we have in this PDF. Maybe we store it as CMYK, particularly in the case of text where we want to make sure that we've got black text and be very accurate about how that's reproduced. We might store information, for example, in our photos based on RGB information, the same RGB information that came directly off the camera in some circumstances, even in using high gamut situations such as Adobe RGB or Apple P3. We can store this information in the original form as it came off a camera, which will help us reproduce it later. Brand colors can be represented within a PDF, such as Adobe Red here, individual spots or separations that have particular definitions and particular meaning that we want to reproduce faithfully. And sometimes that means using spectral color. Spectral color allows us to define colors in terms of how light interacts with this particular color. So we can describe it at different wavelengths. Very, very important in some workflows, particularly in the world of packaging and textile printing, where we need to make different instances of a color match, even if we're using different technologies and printed on different substrates. It's this device independence which is really, really important. The fact that we can print our PDF on any device, be it an offset press or be it a digital device, irrespective of what inks are available, how many inks are available. Do we have extended color gamut inks? Are we using spot colors? This information stored within the PDF means that we can reproduce something and achieve the best possible fidelity for that particular device. PDFs are scalable. So the fact that we're storing all these objects separately means that we can actually reproduce them at any particular size, whether we're printing it small, like on a postcard, or very large, such as on a poster, maybe even on a bus or a building wrap. We can print this content at any particular size that's scalable, and without having to go back to our designer to ask them to redo their work just because we want to print something at a different size or scale. And lastly, as we hinted and intimated earlier, one of the things that makes PDF quite a revolution compared to the PostScript that came before it is that the pages are independent of each other. That means we can put them in any particular order in a signature or on a press sheet, so that whether we're printing on a single page on a single sheet, or 4 up, or 8 up, or 16 up even on a very large press. Pages can be mixed in terms of order and make sure we get exactly the right output on any device. So PDFs then have become fundamental in terms of how we get the artwork from our designer all the way through to the printing solutions that are driven by the Adobe PDF print engine. So now we understand a bit more about PDF. Let's think a little bit more about artificial intelligence and how that appeared at Adobe as well. You may well be familiar with some of the technologies that Adobe has been talking about over the last few years and how they've been brought to bear in our applications. You may have heard about Adobe Firefly. Adobe Firefly is a technology which is consistent across all of our different solutions. And it's Firefly that allows us to create anything from images to videos to sound to vector work. All these different technologies are based on our Adobe Firefly core. And there's many different types of solution which are available. Text to image, of course, is a very common use case. We may well have seen that as well from other people in the industry, where you provide a text prompt describing what you want to see, and you get an image that has been generated based on that prompt. But at Adobe, Firefly is used to do many other types of work in terms of interacting with your content. These are some of the ones which are perhaps applicable for us in a print context, but maybe you want to actually take a design and actually have it look like artwork that's been created with an oil painting, or you want something which is pixelated, like a pixel art, or something that looks like a tattoo. Maybe you want to generate anime characters. Maybe you want to have a cuddly bunny that's been generated for you from a particular prompt. Even using this for animation or sketches is something that we can do with Adobe Firefly. And if you'd like to dig into this a little bit more in detail, you can go to firefly.adobe.com or these other web pages. There are apps available so that you can work with this either in the context of a browser or on a particular device that you're holding in your hand or sitting on your desk with. So not only do we have these generative tools at Adobe that are powered by Firefly, we've taken them into these technologies and embedded them within many of our desktop applications. A couple of them that are relevant in our particular space here in the world of print would be Photoshop and Illustrator. In Photoshop, you've actually got the ability to, while you're in the application, generate images or actually supplement images that you might be working on. So for example, if you had a photograph of this sneaker and you wanted to do something like add a flower to it or a yellow flower, you can do that using AI from within the application. It's all done in a non-destructive way. So any changes that you're making within Photoshop are applied on separate layers and you can blend them in and out to your design as you see fit. This can be really powerful. Say you going back in the field, you get back and find that the photograph that you'd taken of your scene had some power cables in it or some people in the background. It's very easy to isolate these objects and remove them just using the power of AI with a simple click or two. You can even put stuff back into designs as well. You want to generate a background or use this generative expand, which allows you to take a particular design and make it larger. Easy to do with a prompt within Adobe Photoshop. If you want to see more about what's being done with AI in Photoshop, again, you can go to this website, adobe.com/product/photoshop.ai.html. But we're not just restricted to doing this with pixel creations, raster creations within Photoshop. It even works within tools like Adobe Illustrator. The same type of solutions are available in the vector world for designers working with Illustrator. We can type prompts to actually have it create artwork for us. We can use things like the generative expand with vector work. So these things are still editable. All these flowers and leaves we can drag around or make changes to as we see fit. We can further enhance our designs by generating patterns, creating interesting fills, and even defining color palettes, new color palettes, which might complement our particular design, all within Adobe Illustrator. You can go to the website again, find out more about these, adobe.com/projects/illustrator/ai.html. In practice, and it's always fun to see an example, these manifest themselves for different types of use cases. So for example, let's say I had taken this photograph of a small street somewhere in Europe. I actually downloaded this image from Adobe Stock, but it's a portrait image. But if I wanted to use it in a design where I needed something in a landscape format, Normally, I'd expand my canvas in Photoshop, but what I can do within Photoshop is ask Photoshop to expand the image and fill in the blanks. You can see it's imagined for us, generated some of these walls so that we've actually got something now we can use in this particular format. They didn't exist. It's not flown all the way back to Europe and taken a new photograph, but it's created something in the style of the rest of the scene. And we can go further than this. If we wanted to fill in the foreground and put something in there, I might want to generate a person walking up the hill. Again, this was just done by typing a brief prompt into Adobe Photoshop, and it's added this particular object. It's lit it based on the scene. Another thing that's important to see here, I misspelt when I typed. I mistyped walking. But because it's AI, it understands the intention of what I meant, and so it's added somebody walking up the hill, even though I misspelt that word. So we can use these technologies in the world of creation for designers, and that's all very well and good. But how is AI being used in the print world here at Adobe? Let's talk about some of the examples. These come from the new Adobe Print Services. Adobe Print Services is something which is in development at the moment. We'll expect to see it starting to emerge with our partners in 2026. But what's important to see about the world of AI in a print application is that it's not just about RGB anymore, working with images that you might have on your desktop. In a print environment, we want to work in the world of CMYK. More importantly, we want to work in the world of PDF because we might be getting PDF content, but we need to process and enhance and optimize as part of the Adobe Print Services. Now, here are just some of the features we have in Print Services which are powered by AI. We'll dive into a couple of these in a bit more detail. One is in the world of AI-powered image scaling in PDF files. You may well be, have experienced some of these problems yourself. If you've ever received a photograph from somebody as a text message on a phone, images are very easily, we could call them corrupted, compressed, down samples. We reduce the quality of information that's available in these images. One of the benefits we know of PDF is we like to store the highest possible information in there, but sometimes somewhere upstream that information got lost. What we're able to do with the power of AI inside Adobe Print Services is to take those images within PDFs, even if they're in CMYK, and restore them effectively, upsampling those photographs to put in a lot more detail. So I've zoomed in here to see this image. You could see on the left-hand side, it was quite pixelated. You can see JPEG compression artifacts, these discolorations and rectangles that you see there. We can smooth those out and restore this artwork to the best of its form using AI. Another area we use AI within Adobe Print Services to handle outline text in PDF files. Now, you may well be used to this idea of sometimes asking your client to take their Illustrator documents and outline the text because you would like to be able to do work in your prepress department. We can have another discussion some other time about the advantages and disadvantages of asking your customers to outline their text, but designers will do this. Sometimes they're so used to doing it that you don't even have to ask. They've done it already. But remember what we said about PDF earlier on. That one of the advantages of PDF is we store vector and text information separately. And one of the reasons for wanting to do that is that when we store information as text, as fonts within a PDF, we have additional hints, additional information that allows us to reproduce this text in the best possible way at different sizes. So as this text gets smaller, if we've converted the text into outlines, sometimes we see this problem on the left-hand side. You notice on the leftmost and rightmost character we have here, but some of the line work there has filled in because we don't have these hints that are available to us as it was a font. We call this fine line rendering as these characters get smaller and smaller. Well, what we're able to do using AI in Adobe Print Services is detect when this is happening, detect when these outlines were originally fonts, and restore some of this information, which allows us to preserve those strokes and stop those characters from filling in. It's a very powerful feature. It shows the combination of Adobe Print Services with the Adobe PDF print engine. Another area that we're able to work with within Adobe Print Services is think about bleed extension. So sometimes you might be getting a file from a client who didn't actually define the bleed. Let's say they've got this particular card. It was created as a 4x6 design, and they've not allowed for some extra space around the edge of the design where they've provided information for a bleed. Well, with Adobe Print Services, we're able to detect this issue and actually do something to restore it. So we can see where we're going around the outside here and do the most appropriate thing for the job in the appropriate place. So maybe we've detected that we just need to extend that purple fill in the background that we've got going on here for our background color. Or maybe we need to do some extension of an image or lines or something which are abutting the edge of the design. We can do this with the power of AI. Apply the most appropriate bleed extension in the most appropriate case and get the best possible result. Now, that's just a few of the examples of how AI is being used within Adobe Print Services. There's quite a lot of features here, and one of the important things is that you don't want to be spending time going through all these features and deciding, oh, which of these do I want to apply? Remember as well the idea of using this within a web-to-print environment. You don't necessarily want to have somebody to try and examine all the issues that you might have going on and apply each one of them. That'll take time, even if we were giving you the tools. So another big benefit of Adobe Print Services, we have this AI-powered Smart Select feature so that we can automatically configure the application to do the most appropriate fix-up. Saves us time, saves us money, allows us to get on the press as quickly as possible. So those are some of the areas where we're using AI within Adobe Print Services. Now, let's talk for a little bit more about how this works as a use case in the world of embellishment. Embellishment is very hot at the moment. You may well have seen lots of examples of how this can be brought to bear. And one of the exciting things about embellishment is it allows us to bring extra value to our printed products. We can bring this value to the brands that we're printing for and generate better engagement with the end customer as they receive this card and interact with this, maybe this piece of direct mail or this invitation or something. It resonates. It feels tactile in their hands. They like engagement. There's lots of studies that have been done to show that how the use of embellishment basically generates an emotion in people so that they feel a better affinity toward this particular piece of printed product. So we may well be used to the idea that we would start with some CMYK design and maybe add an embellishment later. Now, what we've been working on at Adobe is a solution that can improve this as part of Adobe Print Services. As we get started, I'd like to think about this in a couple of ways. In some cases, we have a designer that we're working with who is familiar with the idea of that they can do embellishment. Maybe they're using a tool such as Adobe Illustrator to define some parts of the job in a particular way. In this case, they've isolated the Be My Valentine message and the heart, and they've assigned a PMS spot color to this to indicate this is where they would like a particular spot color to be applied. And that's where we're going to do the embellishing. Now, in some other use cases, we have designers who don't have intent. They haven't expressed that intent. That might well be because they're using a tool such as Adobe Express, which doesn't have a language for describing embellishment. It may well be that they're not even aware that embellishment is something that they could achieve or use in a job. It might be an opportunity for you as a printer to upsell that work. Add it as a feature. But one of the things that we tend to find in the embellishment world is that there can be complex and differing requirements that different printers have depending on the equipment that they have and the technology that they're using. It's not uncommon for different printers to have to explain to their clients how they expect their work to be prepared and submitted to them. It could be using one file or multiple files or combinations of different techniques and technologies. And that's all very well for the to tell the designer, but the designer is left puzzling, well, how should they best and most simply create their artwork so it could be reused or sent to any number of different printers that might be using different technologies. This gets even more confusing for our casual users, people who are using more of these web-to-print solutions who don't have some of these controls. They just want to be able to see on the screen what they're going to get. And they just don't know how to meet the expectations of the individual printers. So typically, the way we resolve this chasm of confusion that we have is for a print service provider to ask the designer to rework their content based on their particular requirements. It might mean that if they have to send this work to 3 different printers, they have to rework this file 3 different times. Very inefficient. Another solution, if we don't want the designer to have to do the work, is we ask our prepress department that's actually within our press shop to get the source file from a designer and manually convert or rework this stuff so it's compatible with a particular workflow we have. This might take many minutes. It might take hours even to try and understand what the designer was trying to achieve and how to do this conversion. What we hear from print service providers is that even the most experienced designers need to how to be taught to create something that's compatible with their shop. And particularly in the world of web to print, if it's not right the first time, sometimes they'll just turn down the job, because in the world of short print runs, if you have to make one phone call, you could well be losing money on that job. It's massively inefficient, and it really creates a barrier to adoption. So what Adobe's been working on is a solution to this problem for prepress departments and our print service provider friends. We're calling this Project Goldsmith at the moment, and it's part of the Adobe Print Services, which will be available at some point in 2026. Project Goldsmith bridges this chasm between the world of the designer and the world of production. And it allows us to automate job preparation for any embellishment system, whether intent is present or not. We can take some intent if it's been provided, but if it's not there, we can even suggest which areas of the particular file could be embellished. But what's important is that Project Goldsmith understands the different requirements of these different production systems. We've kind of illustrated this on the right-hand side by showing a number of different embellishment technologies. But what's important here is that they have a different way of layering or structuring the content that's required. So in this first case, where we're using a digital foiling, or sometimes called polymer-based digital foiling or cold foil transfer, we would normally take a press sheet which has been printed with CMYK that's been printed on one device, and then use a second device with a second PDF to apply the embellishment on top. There's another application which might use everything in one go, where you've got a device which can do maybe metallic toners or inks to apply a silver, a gold, or a varnish at the same time as printing CMYK from a single PDF file. There might be yet another technique which you could be employing, toner-based digital foiling, sometimes called sleeking, where you're printing a black toner layer down first, which you're then laminating a foil to, and then on a separate pass printing CMYK over the top. Again, you need to prepare your files in a different way so you can print them in this particular order. Foil first and then CMYK, as opposed to at the top, CMYK first and then foiling. And there's yet another solution, of course, which people who use in the industry refer to as foil substrates, where you actually have a sheet of substrate which is already metallic in some way. You need to put a white down to cover that and to block the metallic coating in some places, and then print CMYK over the top to get your results. A very confusing world. What's important is that in the world of print for embellishment, we can use Project Goldsmith to produce whatever's appropriate. So if you need the CMYK press sheet first, and then you're going to print foil over the top, then Goldsmith will generate that for you. Now, let's talk about what we've learned so far in our conversation today in terms of how the world of PDF enables us to do this. For this particular example, the original design had some text and a heart that we needed to separate and print separately as part of the design. Let's think about how this is stored in a PDF file. Remember what we said earlier about PDFs containing these layered objects. We have text separately from our vector, separately from our photo, separately from our colors. So in our Valentine card example, the text is the Be My Valentine, the vector is the heart and the background flood fill of this pink color, and we have a photo stored separately. And colors are there within the PDF file mapped to the different objects independently. Well, what this allows us to do very efficiently within the PDF is to change the assignment of colors and properties to these different objects. We can easily associate the idea that we're going to do a silver foil with one or more aspects of this design, the text of the Be My Valentine and the heart, so that when it comes to generating this output, we have the right information in the right place. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that the heart is missing on the right-hand side from our CMYK press ready output. How did we do that? Remember, we've got PDF. All these objects are independent. We were able to just peel off, if you like, the silver heart and the Be My Valentine, put them in a separate PDF file ready for our embellishment device. And actually, the original information about the image and the fill was still there in our PDF. We could have used AI to fill in the blanks, much as we used it with our generative fill in the earlier examples when we were talking about Photoshop. But one of the important things about being able to do this in our PDF workflows with a Project Goldsmith is we can actually retain the highest possible fidelity here and do it in a way which is compatible with any output device. So the Project Goldsmith that we have here at Adobe allows us to bring this technology to this exciting world of embellishment. And we can't wait to share it with you later in 2026. It's a fundamental part of the Adobe PDF print experience as a module within our Adobe print services. So that's a glimpse then into the world of AI at Adobe and how we're applying this in end-to-end solutions. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit us at one of these websites. You can learn more about the PDF print engine and the Adobe print services at our website, adobe.com/go/APPE. If you'd like to learn more about Project Goldsmith and what we're doing in the world of embellishment, you can go to adobe.com/go/embellishment. And you're welcome to follow and reach out to me via LinkedIn.